And hello again, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Giants Guys. This is John Fennelly, and we have some special guests with us this week. Andy Furman of Ultimate NYG, and his draft and NFL expert wonder, Steve. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Sir?
Thanks for having us,
Thank you.
John.
Very good. I'm very excited about this opportunity to speak to you guys right now. Just to let our listeners know, this is a Giants show, so we'll start off with the Giants, but then we're going to gradually move over to NFL issues and happenings because there's a lot going on this year. It's a very, very active year. The NFL has kind of had a bounce-back year after all the goings-on with the kneeling down and the boycotts and all this other nonsense. We're back to football, which is great. So let's start off with the Giants. I know, Andy, your blog is Ultimate NYG, and you write a lot of interesting stuff on there. Why don't we start talking about the root of what the Giants' issues are? I mean, it goes beyond the field. It goes all the way up to the front office.
I agree, John. It really starts with another John, a guy named John Mara. You know, he's the one who, as the president of operations, he's making a lot of decisions. And when he, brought in Ernie Accorsi, who himself was a little long in the tooth, to execute a GM search, he had 4 people in there, 3 of which were insiders and 1 of which was an outsider. And it was essentially a rigged auction. And we got more of the same. We got more of inside the organization. You know, some of the roots go back to George Young. George Young said, hire who you know. And that might have worked for a couple of decades, but the problem is that right now the people that are inside the Giants organization don't know. So when you're hiring someone who doesn't know inside of what you think that you know, it's going to end up being the same product, and they need a lot of radical change.
Yeah, it's a lot of recycling, in the organization. There's just too much of the same. Right. They're breathing the same air. They're swimming in the same water for too long. They have to look over the neighbor's fence and see what's going on in the next yard. They're not doing that. And
that's right. The league is always evolving, and you see how there are new coaches, new GMs, people who are younger, who are thinking along the lines of like 21st century thinking. Mm-hmm. I mean, Dave Gettleman himself, he talked about how there were 3 things that he felt were important, and of those 3 things, 2 of them are ridiculous. He said, running the ball and stopping the run. Well, guess what? It's a 60-40 league now, mm-hmm. where it's all about passing, and to be thinking about the game from that perspective is really just wrong. And I think that you're seeing the product on the field.
Yeah, it's the draft. Like, I wrote an article in USA Today, I think it was last week, about the 2018 draft class, which we all thought was great in 2018. Now it's 2019. That class doesn't look so good, does it?
No, unfortunately it doesn't. And maybe this is a sort of moment to start pulling wonder in and to start talking a little bit about some of the draft philosophy. We talk a lot about positional value, and I know that we've gone over this a number of times, but it's really, really important for listeners to understand that when you're drafting a running back at 2 overall, I mean, I still think that Saquon Barkley is probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. I really do believe that. I think he's going to be a very, very special running back. Of course, that injury, sidetracked him, pulled him down. He improved greatly this past week versus the Eagles. He really looked a lot more like his spry young self. Steve Sion, wonder. He had Barkley as the number 1 person on his draft board. So it's not like we don't like the player, okay? We don't like the position at 2 overall. And then you kind of see what happens when running backs do get hurt and what happens to the offense. It's just not the same. And then, of course, you have a head coach in Shermer who's not leveraging that skill. And then on top of that, in terms of building from the inside out, they don't have an offensive line that can run block. So it just makes for a very, very bad situation when you've taken 2nd overall a guy like Barkley and you just can't leverage that guy.
Yeah.
If I may, just a couple of generic statements. I know we're talking about the Giants front office. It's important for the listeners to understand that football is unlike any other sport because the coach, the GM, and the owner have to work together from an organizational standpoint to put the best available players on the field, and then it's the player's obligation to execute the plan. It's different than in, for example, basketball, where, you take Michael Jordan and four other pretty good players and you say, throw them the ball and say, just go play. Have a good time, and you're going to do great. So the coaching becomes critical. There's a reason that Belichick, who I hate very much, and the Patriots, who I hate even more, have been so successful. We'll give them credit. It's not that Belichick's that great a coach. It's that he's not as bad as all the others. These are not rocket scientist people. They don't understand math for the most part. They don't understand probabilities. They don't understand expected value. And they certainly don't understand the clock or timeout at the end of the game. And the mere fact that any player in the league actually fair catches a punt at his own 8-yard line with 19 seconds left in the first half is a sign that nobody understands coaching. So, that being said, what the Giants are lacking is structure. They don't have a basic game plan. You can say, well, are they a passing team? Are they a running team? Or this or that? Forget all that. They don't have any clue as to how to run a football organization. So let me begin and tell you how, if I were owner of the Giants, how I could win the Super Bowl, guaranteed within 5 years, if I'd gone back 2 years ago, right? First, the owner has he has to stop making decisions. He has to stop getting involved. We've seen how that works for Jerry Jones. It doesn't work at all. His only relevance on the team itself is who he hires as his GM from an administrative standpoint. The GM's most important job is to find the players and, of course, to hire a coach and a staff. So let's get on with what the Giants need or needed to do going back 2 to 3 years ago. Okay, so Gettleman comes on board, right? He's got OBJ, and the Giants had made the playoffs a couple years before that, and we're just a little bit away, and we just need this and we just need that, and we're going to be right back there. Well, that's just dreaming. It's fantasizing. It's the inability to analyze what are actually the talent levels on your own team. So the first thing I would say is you get rid of Gettleman, you get rid of the coach, and if you want to be the most ridiculous idea in the concept of the world and football, this is what one could theoretically do this year in the coming draft. What you do is you trade every single person on your team, everybody that has any significant value. That includes Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, anybody that you can get first-round draft picks for, anybody. And all you do is you draft offensive linemen and defensive pass rushers, and you need run stoppers, I'll grant you that, speedy linebackers can cover, and defensive backs. And what do? You stink for 2020. Your goal should be to go 0-16, but you're building your draft capital by your rookies that are offensive and defensive linemen getting experience. Then you are able to draft number one in the year 2020
21.
and you get, I beg your pardon, in 2021, and you get to draft Trevor Lawrence, and you will have a franchise that will be fighting for the Super Bowl for the next 10 to 12 years. Easy. The best quarterback that's come out of the draft probably since 1983. He's probably the best prospect, I would say, since Elway, in theory. But the point is, what Andy was getting at, is you can't win in the NFL with a running back star unless you have offensive line to create holes. Is Saquon Barkley better than Emmitt Smith? Hell yeah, he's a better running back than Emmitt Smith. The problem is Saquon Barkley plays for the New York Giants, and Emmitt Smith had Larry Allen, Nate Newton, and Stepnowski and all those guys to block for him up front.
Barkley should be the last piece of the build, not the first piece of the build.
Exactly, John.
Exactly.
John. Oh my God, exactly.
Exactly right, John. You don't draft Barkley unless he's the guy that, as they say, puts you over the top. That's exactly right. You build football teams through the draft with linemen and defensive backs and linebackers. That's what you do. I don't care about receivers. I don't care about running backs. I don't care about quarterbacks. That's who you draft. And then, given the fact you're going to stink because you have no quarterback, running back, and receivers, then you're set to draft your skill positions, as you just stated, John. So the team that stinks the best next year and gets to draft Trevor Lawrence is the team that, if their GM and front office don't screw it up, will have a dynasty for years to come. And even if they want to keep Daniel Jones, draft Trevor Lawrence anyway and trade Daniel Jones. But the point is, you have got to start understanding from the owner down to the GM to the coach that what we have to do is we have to draft and build for today's NFL. What does that mean? Okay. To start with, linebackers. Your old Sam Huff type linebackers, even your Ray Lewis type linebackers, they're going out of style. Why? Because you have to cover the Gronkowskis and the Kamaras in today's NFL. So what do you need? You need a guy like Derek Brooks. You need you need fast linebackers that can A, blitz, and B, cover the outside, whether it be the circle routes by running backs coming out, or whether it be guys in the slot like Edelman doing option routes. You have to be able to cover. You have to be able to react, right? So they have to understand that's what they need. Secondly, the concept of playing zone as a defensive secondary has become insane in the NFL. Why do I say that? Well, because the schemes of the offenses in the NFL have become so detailed, so technical, so scientific, that if you sit back and play a zone, whether it be a young Tom Brady or a Drew Brees, or even these guys like, that can move, like Patrick Mahomes and whatever, they're just going to eat you up alive. They're just going to take you apart. You may not give up an 85-yard pass play, but sure as heck you're going to give up 8, 10, 12 yards at a chunk. So what do? You have to get cornerbacks to play press coverage. You've got to get guys. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to get a lockdown corner per se. They don't come along very often. But you have to get cornerbacks that are fast, that are willing to play press coverage, and that they're physical. Darrelle Revis wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but what he had was probably the strongest hands of any guy his size that ever played cornerback. And he would redirect so that the quarterback and the receiver were out of sync, so to speak. That's the kind of defense you need in the NFL. That's what you need to do. And you need safeties who can cover. You need safeties like Ed Reed, guys like that who react to the ball. I love Jamal Adams. He's great, whatever. He's going to be all-pro. Guess what? I'm a Jet fan. He can't cover the way Ed Reed could cover. He can't be that center fielder in the back. And that's what you need in today's NFL. You need a healthy Eric Berry or Earl Thomas. Andy will tell you I had them in my top 10 in the draft going back, whatever it was, 10 years ago. So the point I'm trying to make...
I think in this year's draft, we talked about a player by the name of Juan Thornhill, who is now with Kansas City, who's playing very well for them, by the way, and does exactly what you're saying.
You're exactly right. But the point is, you have to have a plan. If you're just random as to what you're looking to do, you're never going to succeed. So what you just said before, John, about Saquon Barkley being the, shall we say, the last piece or the last component, you have to have an organizational plan that says, okay, we're going to build the offensive line. The Dallas Cowboys did that 25, 28 years ago with Jimmy Johnson in the Herschel Walker trade.
Right.
And they won 3 out of 4 years for a Super Bowl. And if Jones wasn't such an egomaniac and let Jimmy Johnson run the show, my guess is the Cowboys would have won 7 Super Bowls in the 90s. That's my guess. People talk about the triplets: Aikman, Irvin, Emmitt Smith.
Right.
Were they really that good? Think about it. Was Aikman as good as Brett Favre?
No.
As
Aikman is on a level with Phil Simms.
Exactly. Was Michael Irvin, the playmaker, really that great a wide receiver? No, he wasn't.
No, he's no Jerry Rice or Randy Moss, that's for sure.
Exactly. You are exactly right. The reason they succeeded was because their O-line just dominated.
Yeah.
So what happens? Emmitt Smith, you have to key on because he's going to run the ball. What does that mean? You have to drop a safety down. What does that mean? It means your tight ends and your wide receivers are going to have more room over the middle and on post patterns as well as deep outs. It's very simple. It's not complicated. It really isn't. So as an organization, you must say to yourself, you know what? We stink. We're going to tear it down. We're going to start again.
And they did not do that, Steve. You see, that's the biggest problem. In 2018, Gettleman had this incredible opportunity. He could really tear it down. It was his first year as GM, and he thought that he had a good enough roster to actually compete. That was his first huge bad mistake.
The fact that they thought they could rebuild and compete at the same time was ludicrous. It's just silly.
You know, John, you should take that statement you just made, laminate it, and put it on the Giants' wall at their training facility, because you're 100%. And by the way, this past year, I never would have taken Daniel Jones. Ever. No. Why? It wasn't time. They didn't have enough pieces around him. And if you were going to draft Daniel Jones, I would have let him sit and wait, have Eli Manning be the quarterback, and make sure I was 0-16. I would have made sure I was 0-16.
We thought that was the plan.
I would never have drafted Daniel. The plan is to draft Trevor Lawrence. If anybody doesn't understand that, they shouldn't be the GM. They should say to their fans, now look, we're not tanking because We always want our players to try their best, be politically correct. However, fans, I want you to know that we're rebuilding our roster with a look to the future. And we're going to experience some growing pains. But I assure you that 2 to 3 years from now, we will be a very competitive Super Bowl-ish contender moving forward.
Right.
So please have patience with us as we go through our growing pains. And you know what? If you told the fans the truth, they'd be okay with that. They really would.
Here's the thing, Steve.
They would be okay.
They're not telling the
that.
fans anything right now. They haven't spoken to the media in months. The ownership or the GM hasn't spoken since the summer. So nobody knows what's happening.
Because they don't know what to say, and they're embarrassed by their choices and their decisions. So they don't want to look like idiots, even though they're idiots. So if I had been GM of the Giants in this past draft, to not draft Josh Allen,
oh boy,
was, it was just crazy. You just draft Josh Allen, all right?
They made so many errors in that first round.
Board.
It's just not even. I can't even.
Right. And you draft and look. I actually liked Lawrence, and I still like Lawrence.
Oh yeah,
he was one of my guys in my draft. I have no problem drafting good defensive linemen, linebackers, or hybrids. Particularly outside linebackers that can rush the passer, like Josh Allen, are worth their weight in gold in this league. See Von Miller, see Khalil Mack. And that's who you draft. So you have no quarterback, and you go 0-16, 1-15, 2-14, and hope that's good enough.
Which is what they're doing
and
anyway.
Right, but the key is I wouldn't even want a quarterback going into next year. I don't care who I threw out there. I don't care if I signed Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2020. I could care less who I threw out there. You want to get Brian Hoyer as quarterback for a year? Fine. Who cares? Just stink. Make sure you stink. Develop your young linemen, and then get Trevor Lawrence in 2021.
Yeah.
If that was your plan and you had done that, the fans would have been okay with that. They really would have. The smart fans would have said, well, Trevor Lawrence is, as they say, a once-in-a-generation football player. All right? And you can talk about Joe Burrow I'm sure he's going to Heisman today, and I'm sure he's going to be good in the pros. Trevor Lawrence is special, very special. And if you could build your offensive lineman
ahead of him,
if you notice, Aikman got the absolute tar beat out of him.
Oh, yeah.
One of the reasons he had to retire early was because of all the concussions he had sustained early on in his career.
Yep.
Right? It wasn't time yet for the Cowboys to draft a quarterback because they needed to surround him with offensive linemen to protect him first. So they got a little bit lucky in how things fell into place for them. But the point is, the best part of a young quarterback's progress moving forward is an offensive line that, number one, makes sure he doesn't turn into David Carr, and number two, gets ready for a great quarterback, great receivers, and Saquon Barkley, as John so aptly stated, as the last component. That's what the Giants need to do. So I got to tell you, if you're looking, I'm dead serious. If you could get 2 number 1 picks for Saquon Barkley, I would trade him in the offseason. I would do it in an instant.
Which they'll never do, of course.
No.
Which they'll never do. If I could trade Daniel Jones for a number one pick, I would do it in an instant. I would make sure that I was 0-16 the next year. That's what I would do.
And keeping those guys, those guys don't guarantee you're going to win any games anyway. Because look what's happening this year.
With this offensive line, I mean, I got to tell you, there isn't a single guy on the offensive line that can run block. Maybe Zeitler. I think Zeitler can run block. Can anyone else on that line run block?
But Zeitler's going to grow. Zeitler's going to be too old.
Yes, I understand. That's the whole point. The whole point is that whole offensive line, needs to. I think maybe Hernandez is like the only one on that offensive line who could be salvaged.
And he's surrounded, Andy. The problem with Hernandez this year, just to interject here, his shoulder is so bad, and Jalapeno is so bad that he's sandwiched in between those guys, and now he's bad too. They're all painted with the same brush now because that line has no cohesion. Those two guys are trying to survive out there, and he doesn't know who to block half the time because the defenses know where to go.
Maybe they should clone. You know what the Giants need to do? They need to clone Sarnecki, the old Patriots OL coach.
Yeah.
Dante Scarnecchia,
well, that's one of the problems. Yeah.
Scarnecchia, yeah.
So
that's what they really need. But you're right. They have no plan, no cohesiveness, nothing. Zero.
When you have guys that are over the hill, like Solder, he was over the hill when they signed him. He's never been to the Pro Bowl, this guy. He's the highest paid tackle in the league. That's insane.
It's unbelievable. But, okay, I'm gonna go on a little diatribe that's a little off base here, but when you talk about what you just said, one of the highest paid tackles in the league, the reason your comment is so appropriate and so accurate is we were going to get into this, but there's a difference between the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball, the three major sports. Simply put, Major League Baseball has no cap because Marvin Miller was a genius, right? So as a result, if you're the New York Yankees and you have unlimited money, even if you swing and miss on a free agent, it doesn't matter. Just get the next one in.
Like Jacoby Ellsbury.
Spend as much money as you can and get the best players.
Sure.
The NBA has a soft cap, which is the worst kind of cap. It's a ridiculous structure they came up with. So the only thing that matters in the NBA is actually stinking enough so that you can draft 1, 2, or 3, and that you hit home runs in at least 2 out of 3 years, so that you have at least 2 great young upcoming superstars. Then, since your salary is just so low, you get rid of everybody except your young superstars who cost nothing because of the their monetary system on the draft choices. Yeah. Right, and then what you do is you then sign and you get Shaquille O'Neal from Orlando, right? You get Kevin Durant, you get whoever you want to get, and you give them LeBron James, Miami, whatever. You spend whatever money you want. Then when it's time for your players, your young drafted superstars in years 3, 4, you can overexceed the cap by $100 million. It doesn't matter. There is no cap because of their bird rights, and that's how you build a team in the NBA. Now in football, excuse me, what John is saying is that we spent roughly $17 million a year on Solder, which represents approximately 10% of your cap. And the NFL is what they call a hard cap league. There are no ifs, ands, and buts. It's a hard cap. You're allowed to spend X dollars on X players. And as Andy so often says, the only thing that matters is expected value for your money. So, for example, if you get a guy for $1 million, and he's not particularly good, but he's serviceable, he's good on special teams, He can fill in as a linebacker if one of the guys gets hurt. That's fantastic value. That's great value. If you get a guy for $17 million, even if he plays like okay to pretty good, that's bad. That's bad because for $17 million, you better get someone like Khalil Mack who changes the game. So the Giants have no clue as to what it means to sign a player for X number of dollars. Now, do you have to pay a premium for free agents? Yes, you do. The reason being is because everyone in the world is competing for the same guys. But you have to know how to spend your dollars so that you don't destroy the rest of your hard cap. And one of the things that the Giants have done, which is so abominable, is they have done two of the things that Wonder hates the most. Number one, if you draft a running back, that's going to be a stud. He's only going to be a stud for 5 to 6 years. And by that, what I mean, a guy who just absolutely transforms your team. When the Houston Oilers had Earl Campbell, when the Rams had Eric Dickerson, okay?
Well, it's a different era, too.
Mm-hmm. Different era. But those were game-changing guys, but they still only had like 5 years. So, as John said, again, to be redundant, as John said before, he should be your last component. That's exactly right. So, what the Giants, in effect, are doing, they are wasting Saquon Barkley's prime years. That's what they're doing. Saquon Barkley probably has 4 or 5 more great years, and they have no plan. They have not given him the offensive lineman that they need, and they have not built the defense that they need. So as a result, even if a new guy comes in and he starts doing the right things, it'll probably take about 3 years to build that offensive line, defensive line, secondary, all those things. And by that time, Saquon Barkley will no longer be Saquon Barkley. That's the pathetic part about it. Secondly, you don't spend on free agency unless you're ready to compete.
You mean, wait a second, let me ask a question. Do you think that going for this guy, Leonard Williams,
oh my God.
Were the Giants ready for that?
Well,
I mean,
not only that, but look, I'm a Jet fan. Leonard Williams is one of the most disappointing guys. I mean, because, number one, he's a great character guy. He really tries hard. He's a team player. He's everything you would want in a teammate. And he has physical qualities. He's great. He can stack up the box. He can stop the run at times. But there's like something missing where he's always a step slow to sack the quarterback.
Correct.
I don't know what it is exactly. I've seen him 100 times. And they say, oh, yeah, but he's got a lot of quarterback hits. Well, that's great. While he's in the quarterback, he's throwing a 60-yard touchdown pass. That's great. Okay?
And he gets a penalty if the hit's too late.
Right, exactly. So, is he a guy I'd like on my team? Sure. He's a good player. What's it going to cost in 2020 to sign him? Forget the draft picks you gave up.
The whole point
is that
they just weren't ready. That was the whole point. The whole point is that they weren't ready, and now that they, and with them not being ready, they're going to have to pay like $10 million a year for this guy. It's just crazy. They're just not ready.
Right. So this is what I don't even know if Jerry Jones knew what he was doing, but Jimmy Johnson sure as hell did. Jimmy Johnson realized, you know what? I can get me an offensive line. Trade everything you can, do everything you can, and invest in your offensive line. And that's what they did back in the early 90s. And, history repeats itself. The Los Angeles Rams were great last year. And if if McVay hadn't gotten so far out-coached by Belichick, it was amongst the worst coaching games I've ever seen in my life. The Rams were so much better team than the Patriots. Particularly, you see what the Patriots did in that Super Bowl. Tom Brady would look old and washed up and like a beaten man.
Yep.
And their defense held them to 3 points going into the fourth quarter. And he had no game plan. None. So, but what they did was they built up their offensive line for Goff and for Gurley, and their last piece was Whitworth, who was older, but they needed that left tackle to protect. So that's the equivalent of Solder. But as John stated, number one, Solder, everyone was ecstatic. Andy will tell you, we can get it out of the clipping. I said this was amongst the worst things they could ever do. Right, Andy? It's on the record.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'll just recap for our audience. I mean, Steve said that, a 4-year deal. He said that he would be good in the first year, and that he would be mediocre in the second year, and that he wouldn't even see the third and fourth year of his contract. And what's happened, of course, is that they've renegotiated that contract. So it's possible that Solder would come back, but it just belies the point. That the whole thing was just way too much money for that guy. Way too much money.
Right. So what the Rams did was smart, and they built their offensive line. And what did they do in the off season? They screwed up. They let their pieces get away. Mm. They put their money in the wrong places. And as a result, I understand Whitworth is a year older. He's like 36 now. He's still playing okay, not fantastic, but pretty good. But what's happened is they've lost their mojo, which is controlling both lines of scrimmage with Aaron Donald on defense, to where their play action, which was the best in the NFL by far last year, is now really not so great because their running game isn't so good. And the reason their running game isn't so good is because they decide to save money on the offensive line. Big mistake.
Yep.
Big mistake. And the Cowboys, by the way, the Cowboys did the same thing. Just so Cowboys did the same thing, right?
The Rams replaced Southold and Sullivan with Noteboom and Allen. I mean, it was just a major downgrade.
And the Cowboys, who had one of the great offensive lines, because Stephen Jones told his dad about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was, Dad, we stink. We can't win because we don't have an offensive line. And even though it wasn't pretty, they drafted Collins, they drafted Fredericton, they drafted the left
Zach
tackle.
Martin.
Oh my God, I forget his name.
Zach Martin was the first.
I beg your pardon?
There. Zach Martin was the first guy. The Notre Dame guy.
Okay, but who's their left tackle? I forget his name. The Beast.
Tyron Smith.
Yeah, Smith. Yeah.
Tyron Smith.
The USC kid, yeah.
Right. Okay, so my point is they had 4 number 1 picks on their offensive line. Everyone criticized them for drafting Trevor Fredericton. The guy's like an all-pro center.
Yeah.
And look, as someone who roots for the team that has the worst history in the last 50 years, the Jets, the only time they were even remotely relevant is when they had the foresight to draft Mangold and Ferguson with their 2 number 1 picks that one year back in whatever it was, 04, 05, whatever it was. And they developed and they added a couple pieces and they had a good offensive line so that
they brought in guys like Alan Faneca, had some good players there.
Right, but then when they drafted, a mediocre Mark Sanchez, basically they just covered him up. They just totally protected him with the offensive line, and they got the two AFC championships because of their O-line and their defense, right? Daniel Jones has nothing to work with. Have you noticed, by the way, that in the beginning of the season, Daniel Jones was just winging the ball, right?
Yeah.
What's happened in the last 4 to 6 weeks with Daniel Jones? Have you noticed?
Yeah.
He's starting. He's starting like Darnold. He's starting to see ghosts, right? He's starting to look over his shoulder.
Yes.
Because he knows that Solder's not going to block his guy and he's going to get killed. Okay.
And that's been the case,
he can
and
sense it. He
that
knows.
leads to a quicker release, shorter passes, slower offense, and you're stuck in the mud.
And your quarterback does not progress and does not develop.
Correct.
All right. You know something weird? They talk about the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk and the guys, whatever. The reality is, it all started in '96 when they drafted Orlando. They traded with the Jets and moved up to number 1 in the draft and took Orlando Pace as their left tackle.
Yeah, what an anchor for that line.
Yeah, he was a building with feet, that guy.
Now, so I just want to know one thing. What is the Giants' plan? Nobody has a plan.
Well, I think that's what we were saying before. Is the reason why the front office isn't talking is because whatever plan they had blew up in their face, and now they don't know what to do. They have no idea. They're cutting guys like Janoris Jenkins, who they should have cut anyway. She shouldn't even be on the team this year. Jenkins, he should have been gone last. They should have traded him last year when they had the chance, and they decided not to.
Belichick has a very strange but kind of good philosophy in a weird way. He rather trade a guy a year or so before he really should be traded,
right?
As opposed to waiting too long, which is what you're saying, John.
And he does it all the time, Belichick. He did that with Jamie Collins, and where's Jamie Collins now? He's back with the Patriots anyway. He signed him back.
And by the way, but Jamie Collins became a really good player after he was gone from the Patriots.
Oh, yeah, he was good with the Patriots. He went to Cleveland. Nobody cared what he did. Nobody really saw him play because Cleveland wasn't on TV. And then when he became a free agent, he signed back with New England. So, it's the Aroldis Chapman
deal. But even when Belichick makes mistakes, like it turned out he didn't want to pay him, and it was bad to lose Chandler Jones. But his perspective is, I'd rather be wrong occasionally than simply be wrong all the time. Which is, when you hang on to guys too long, you just can't win.
Well, so, I think that's a good segue. Let's just talk for a couple of minutes here, Steve, about the things that Belichick does in terms of his architecture. How are the New England Patriots, who have so much turnover, just like every other team, they have so much turnover, yet they're competitive every year? How do they do it?
Well, the first thing that Belichick does is he drafts players for a particular reason.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, will they fit into his coaching philosophy and how to build a team? If the answer is yes, he will take them. If the answer is no, he will not. Number two, they coach. They actually do the one thing in the NFL that the coaches don't do.
Agree.
They teach.
Yep.
Let
me just interrupt you a second. They do it during the game as well. You will see Belichick go over to the bench and talk to his offensive line or his secondary, and he will tell them during the game what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what he needs them to do. You don't see any other coach do that. You don't see Andy Reid even do
No.
that.
That's a really, really good point, John. I mean, it just shows you, how Belichick builds. He's always doing it on knowledge.
That's right. And basically what he does is kind of weird. He runs a professional college team. By that, what I mean is he's professional, which means he's not buddies with his team.
No.
He's not like Pete Carroll. He doesn't want to be liked. He doesn't care about being liked. He's professional. But he will demand respect. But he will also treat, even though the rumor is, well, Brady's just one of the guys or whatever, the reality is he treats his stars a little bit different, but he expects his stars to pick up the mantle, so to speak, and demand performance from their associates, right?
Correct.
Number two, what Belichick does, he doesn't ask guys to do things they're not capable of doing. Simple as that.
Right.
If a cornerback is not capable of covering Julio Jones, Belichick will say to himself, why do I want to embarrass this guy on TV and have Julio Jones catch 9 passes for 145 yards and 3 touchdowns? Why don't I get him help? Right?
Yep.
So instead of putting your best cornerback on Julio Jones, for example, what he'll do is he'll have front and back coverage and just take a player and just double team him. Just say, you know what? We're not going to let Julio Jones beat us because my guy's not good enough. And he's not upset about it. He just does it. Before they changed the rules and he had Ty Law, fine. He'd put Ty Law on him, and Ty Law would just grab and hold the guy forever, and Belichick would have confidence in him to do that, right? Belichick only cares. He's like Nike. Just do it. Get it done. That's it.
Do
That's
your
all
job.
He cares about.
Do your job.
Do your job. Get it done. And by the way, the thing that he's the best on, he realizes that his opponents are a different team every week. All right?
That's right.
Are you playing the Kansas City Chiefs, or are you playing like the Tennessee Titans, a running, tough defensive type team? He will have different game plans. So he adjusts to what is necessary. And the other thing that Belichick is Belichick is relatively smart. The rest of the coaches in the league are just relatively dumb. The last great coach was Bill Walsh. Okay? In terms of being innovative, creative, whatever. All right? They talk about, Kansas City, Andy Reid, the offense, Andy Reid, this. Andy Reid is not a good coach. He isn't. The only reason he's a good coach now is because he's got Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback.
That's
and he's got Ty Hill, Kelsey, okay? And if Kareem Hunt had been a normal human being instead of a moron, they would be right in position to win the Super Bowl every year if he could only learn to draft defensive linemen that could rush the passer.
We're getting back to Belichick, and somebody mentioned this. I can't remember who it was. Why are you always taking secondary players from Rutgers? What do you love so much about them? And he didn't say it, but I figured it out. Rutgers gets passed on 80% of the time. So these guys are battle-tested. Now that they're in the Big Ten, it's like an aerial show every time you play Rutgers. So these guys learn through repetition. So, they have to cover every play. So, and the other part was the McCourty brothers. There's something to be said about putting 2 brothers on the field at the same time. There's a lot invested there. There's
absolutely.
a lot of synergy there, too. They couldn't play for any other team individually, probably right now. But they could play together on the Patriots.
Well, it's funny. That's what the Milwaukee Bucks did. They brought Robin Lopez in to be the backup center to his twin.
Yeah.
And it's been unbelievably effective.
Yes, it certainly has. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the NFL. I wanted to ask you a question. Now, we all talked about Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't have taken him in the first round. He was taken with the last pick in the first round, so let's be fair. I wouldn't have taken him in the first round because of one reason. I don't know what to do with him. You just can't put him in your offense and say, okay, you can run my offense. He has to have a specific offense that he can run in. And John Harbaugh, smart enough to realize, let's run an option offense, which is what they do. And let's get him another running back. Mark Ingram happened to be on the market. They picked him up, and look at what happened. Unbelievable.
You're forgetting the most critical component.
Their offensive line is tremendous, too.
Marshall Yanda.
Yeah, you got that right.
Okay. Let me tell you something. I love Lamar Jackson. He's changing the league, whatever. If you put him on the Jets, he'd already be in the hospital.
Or worse.
Right, or worse. I mean,
retired.
The other thing that people don't understand is they talk about him just passing Michael Vick. Lamar Jackson is nothing like Michael Vick.
No, not at all.
Physically. No. This guy is about, I'd say, 6'2 to 6'3 and weighs about 220. In that neighborhood. Maybe 215 to 220.
Yes.
But he's actually wiry. And my bet is that in the off season, he's going to put on 10 more pounds of muscle.
Oh, he's going to get bigger.
That's my bet.
Yeah.
He's going to get physically stronger. He won't lose his speed if he doesn't have a major injury. And if you really look at him carefully, yes, there are plays where he's actually a running back and he takes on defenders. But there are a whole ton of plays where John Harbaugh has instructed him, get your ass down or get out of bounds. So the number of hits that he takes is still more than any other quarterback in the league. But the kind of hits that he takes are much, much less and much not clearly as intensive, and he doesn't get blown up the way other coaches would have him if he was on their team.
Right.
So John Harbaugh has done an unbelievable job. By the way, you'll be interested to know that in the Gronkowski draft, Wonder talked about it being the best tight end draft in the history of the NFL. Right, Andy?
That's right.
Okay. I had so many guys. I forget all the guys that there were, but there were tons of guys.
Oh, well,
guys like
Graham.
Dennis Sitta. Yeah, right. Graham. All these guys.
Hernandez was in that year, too. I mean, it was just crazy.
Right. But the prior year, I said, oh, my God, this is not as good, but this is an unbelievable tight end draft. And I talked about Mark Andrews. I talked about Hayden Hurst. I talked about, I forget all the guys that I refer to as great quality tight ends. So what do the Baltimore Ravens do? They don't take just one tight end from that group. They take two. Now, truthfully, I had Hayden Hurst graded ahead of Andrews.
Yeah.
I thought Andrews may have been a little bit overrated because of the system at Oklahoma, but I still really liked him, right? And by the way, if Mark Andrews wasn't on that team, trust me, Hurst would be dominant also. They have two great tight ends who can block as well as catch. So what Harbaugh did was say, okay, we're going to get a couple of monsters up there who could block, but that can also slip out into the flat, over the middle, or down the seam. And that's what they do. Because if you stack the box and you go after Lamar Jackson, you're left with that kind of damned if you, damned if you don't. Now, as long as you bring it up, I will tell you how to defend the Baltimore Ravens. And if the Patriots somehow make it to the AFC Finals to play the Ravens, you will see this. What Belichick would do is he would spread out his defensive line, and he would play with very few linebackers. He would play with only one safety. He would rely on his defensive secondary. And what he would do is basically make it almost impossible for Lamar Jackson to have free lanes,
right,
without getting hit. So he's going to have 6 or 7 across. He's going to play almost like the old Bears 46 defense. And that's the only way to play Lamar Jackson. You have to, it's almost like a battlefield where your troops have to slowly march back to the quarterback, but that you keep your line intact, so to speak, so that you don't have a break in your coverage, so to speak, where he can just slip through. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, and sometimes he's going to slip through, but what I'm saying is the plays where he runs the option, the reason it's effective is the read option. Lamar Jackson is used to looking at the outside linebacker or sometimes the defensive end to see how he reacts when the ball is in the belly of Ingram. That's what the read option is by definition.
Right.
Why the coaches are so stupid, all they have to do is instruct the guy on the outside, never go inside. Never go for the fake, period. Ever. Do not lose your line integrity. You are responsible for sealing the edge, period. Just do your job. Let the interior lineman and the linebacker worry about Mark Ingram going up the middle. So what if you had a chance to slip behind the line and tackle him for a 1 or 2 yard loss or no gain? I don't care. Just don't let Lamar Jackson keep the ball and go wide. Now, on top of that, if you stick an extra guy to the right of the right outside linebacker, and you know who I would do it with? I would do it with a safety. That's how I would defend Lamar Jackson.
You have to get a faster player in there to do that spy work.
But it's not really a spy. It's not really a spy because there isn't a spy in the NFL that's fast enough to spy on Lamar Jackson because he's going to get caught behind the rubble of the offensive and defensive lines.
Right.
Okay? But what you can do though is you can bring your safeties up to the outside of your outside linebackers, right? So you actually almost have like a 6.5 man front, so to speak. And then as the play develops, if it's going to the left, then your safety who's on your defensive right, he stays down in the box. And the guy who was on your left defensive front, he can now drop back because there's no running to his side. So now you have 5 in the back as opposed to 4 in the back. All right? And it's not very complicated. That's what every team should do. But they don't do it. because it's not, quote, a normal defense. I don't understand why they don't do it.
Well, they're not dealing with a normal player,
Jackson,
so they really have to think out of the box.
Right, but I said this with the Patriots back in 07 and 08 and whatever. I would rather die one simple knife right to my heart than rather have Brady take 8 minutes and 13 plays to chop me up and slice and dice me 8, 10, 12 yards at a clip.
True.
For 15 years, people didn't understand this. Rex Ryan actually kind of understood it. He just didn't have a good enough team. Well, they beat him in the one playoff game. What you should have done with that 2007 team. Now, granted, the Giants. The Giants beat him in the Super Bowl because of their great defensive line and so on and so on and so forth. But no one seemed to realize the only way to beat the Patriots was I would have blitzed Brady every single down. I would have had one-on-one coverage on the outside. I don't care. My entire goal would have been to plant Brady and get him out of the game. I don't care. And by the way, I wouldn't have cared if, I'm not saying to be dirty, but, if you're occasionally called for a late hit, because you were going for him, that's okay with me. All right? But to sit there and play either zone coverage or this or that and let him just slowly pick you apart because you don't want to look like an idiot because, the guy beat you for the easiest 80-yard touchdown pass in the world, right? I'd rather do that. I would have gone after him, okay? So now you have Lamar Jackson, who's a new animal, a new breed.
Well, we got to wrap up here, Steve. We're right up against the time.
Okay, real fast, what you're asking about Lamar Jackson is you got to devise a defense where he cannot beat you with his legs. You force him to beat you with his arm.
Which he might be able to do, but that's okay.
But let's see him do it.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop here.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much for having us.
Great to talk to you guys
really
again.
Appreciate it. Well, the next time we talk, can you please assure me of two things?
Sure.
Number one, Gettleman is no longer the general manager of the New York Giants, and Shermer is no longer the coach of the New York Giants. Can you do that for me?
I certainly would hope I could, but I don't think I can.
Real fast, let it go. Take a chance on a college coach.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley. What's his name? Franklin, the guy from Penn State.
Yeah.
Or, dare I say, Urban Meyer.
Dare you say
Think about it.
I would love to see Urban Meyer here. Anybody who can manage a sideline. I'll even take a basketball coach at this point. I don't care who, as long as they can manage a team. This guy has got his head buried in a plate chart.
And by the way, Mike Leach may be ready. He may finally be ready. I'm just saying.
He's ready. Ready. He's ready for a straitjacket, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, in general he is, but he is brilliant in his own way.
Oh, absolutely. His coaching tree is amazing.
It is amazing.
He's a great coach, a great mind, but in New York City, I don't know if he's going to cut it.
Well, probably not, but
maybe we'll be back in the
Meyer.
spring. Maybe we'll be back in the spring. We'll be talking about the new head coach, and we'll be talking about some draft strategy.
Yeah.
And I forgot. There's one last thing you have to do, John.
Okay.
One last thing.
One more thing.
You know how Trump got Woody Johnson to be the ambassador to England, so they got him out of the way? You got to have someone do something for Mara. Make him the ambassador to Peru or Venezuela and send him down there. That'd be better.
Iceland is good. Yeah. Iceland would be a good place. Yeah. The sun doesn't go down.
Thank you so much, John, for your time.
Yeah, the sun doesn't go down there, but it's definitely going down on these Giants. I'll tell you that much. All right, guys.
That's
Thanks for
right,
coming
that's
on, and we'll talk again soon. We'll be back.
Be well and have a happy holiday season to all.
Okay.
15 seconds to air. Stand by, all cameras.
Ready with slow motion and isolated cameras.
Stand by, videotape, and roll tape.
And tape is rolling in less than 5, in 3, 2, 1.
Take tape.